Now there is a person, a Jewish person, who is responsible in ways that are very hard to determine historically for a radical transformation. Right? And of course, this is Jesus of Nazareth. And probably the most pretentious thing I'm going to do is trying to speak about Jesus of Nazareth. My endeavor is to not try and give some final complete version of this. That would be hubris and arrogance on my part. My endeavor is to try and explain what Jesus via Christianity did to that Israelite axial legacy, because that is what is relevant to what we are discussing here and now. Christianity is going to propose this radical idea that God's creative logos, the word he speaks through the prophets, that it's the same word by which he speaks things into existence, the word that helps create history, the word that causes kairos, makes kairos possible for us. So logos doesn't mean just spoken words. It means like the intelligibility, the formative principle, the underlying structure. Christianity, it's in the Gospel of John, anarche and logos. In the beginning was the logos. But what is John appropriating it to say? He's saying that God's capacity for producing kairos through logos has been identified, or to use an older term, incarnated in a particular individual. That Jesus of Nazareth is actually the ultimate kairos, that all the other kairoses were pointing to him and are summed up in him. That he represents the ultimate turning point. And he represents it not only historically, he represents it personally. Because he is a person, you can identify with him, and that kairos can come to take place in you personally. The encounter with Jesus means that you too can experience a profoundly personal kairos, which Jesus seems to have spoken about using a metaphor of being born again, about such a radical metanoia, a radical shifting. This is often translated as conversion, but this word is much closer to awakening. Noia means noticing. This is your perspectival awareness. And meta means beyond. This means a radical transformation in your salience landscape. A radical transformation of what it's like to be you. It's this deeply perspectival and participatory transformation. And Jesus is saying he incarnates the principle by which you can intervene in your own personal history such that this metanoia, you will have a new mind, a new heart, a new modal existence. You will be born again. What's going on there? What does this kairos look like? What could possibly so radically transform my salience landscape, my sense of self, my processes of co-identification? What could bring that about? And now I'm going to say the word, and then you're going to laugh because it sounds like a Hallmark card. The Christian answer is love, and now we all titter. That's so quaint. Love. Sounds like, oh, love. Okay. The problem with that is that this word is trivialized for us. We use one word to talk about so many different things. Like, I love peanut butter cookies. I love Canada. I love Sarah. I love my son. I love a really good, game of tennis. Are those the same? We're even confused about this. We think that love is an emotion. No, it's not. Love is a modal way of being. Love isn't a feeling, and it is not an emotion. How do I know this? Because loving someone can be expressed by being sad when they're absent, being happy when they're present, being jealous when there's somebody else around, being angry when they're neglecting you. Love isn't a feeling. It isn't an emotion. It is a modal way of being. It is an agent-arena relationship. And what Jesus seemed to be incarnating as a kairos to change the history of the world and to offer you to change your own personal history is a different kind of love. This is agape. We have to distinguish between three kinds of love: eros, philia, and agape. See, eros is the love that seeks to be one with something. And that can be spiritual, like being one with nature, or it can be being one with a cookie by eating it. Of course, we come to think of eros erotically, right? Being one with somebody by having sex with them. Right? But remember, Socrates knew ta erotica, which wasn't just sex. Socrates knew what to care about. This is philia. So this is the love that is satisfied through consummation. Philia, this is the love that seeks cooperation. This is the love in which we experience reciprocity. We love the cookie because we can consume it. We love our friends because we are in reciprocity with them. And agape, this is the love that a parent has for a child. And this is what Jesus claimed was how God loved individuals. This is not the love of consummation. You're not trying to consume the child. That's evil. And it's not friendship. You're not, like, when you bring a child home from the hospital, and I've done this twice, right? That's not your friend. It's not even a person. You can't, it's basically a slug. But here's the astonishing thing. You love it. Not because of any way you can consume it or be one with it. Ew. Ew. You don't love it because, hey, what, great friendship. You love it because by loving it, you turn a non-person into a person. It's the closest thing to a miracle, and that sounds hackney, I know, but stop back and think about this. You depend on agape. It's because people loved you before you were a person that you have become the person you are. Love turns non-person animals into moral agent persons. It's like somehow if I could just care about my sofa enough, it would turn into a Ferrari or something. It's that powerful. And here's what Jesus was offering. That love can be exacted and made available for all. Here's what is on offer. Here's why Christianity will take the Roman Empire culturally. With agape, Christianity can say to all of the non-persons of the Roman Empire, all the women, all the children, all the non-male citizens, all the sick, all the poor, all the widowed, can take all of those non-persons and say, we will turn you into persons. Persons that belong to the kingdom of God. We'll take another look at this in more detail next time. So we were talking about one of the core messages of Jesus. Jesus seems to have understood himself, or at least those around him, understood him as kairos. If you remember, that's a turning point in the course of history, because as we spoke before, the Israelites had developed the psychotechnology of understanding history as a cosmic narrative in which there are crucial turning points, and Jesus saw himself as such a kairos. Whether or not he saw himself as the kairos that was known as the Jewish Messiah is again controversial. I don't need that for the purposes of my argument. It seems, though, that he had a sense of himself as deeply participating in the way in which God was directing and involving himself in the course of history. If you remember the model of God we talked about when we talked about the ancient Israelite, the God of the Exodus is a God who is creating into an open future, and that human beings participate in that creation by identifying with a particular course, da'ath, loving it, being shaped by it, as well as participating in its flow. And Jesus of Nazareth saw himself as having an especially deep participation, such that he felt himself to be at one with this God who is capable of altering the course of history and redeeming human beings. He seems to have understood this, kairos, as having something to do with a profound way of understanding the participation in God, which we've talked about before, makes sense. We've talked about how this participatory knowing is a process in which you're coupled, right? You're neither making it or being made by it, but it's this reciprocal revelation in which you are making it and it is making you. The way you participate in your culture, the way you participate in your language, the way you participate in history. And you know this not by gathering beliefs, but the way in which yourself is fundamentally transformed. And so Jesus understood this participation, his participation in God as the disclosing of this profound kind of love. And we began talking about this, the kinds of love that human beings experience, and how love is something that deeply transforms who we are and our salience, landscape, our character. We talked about the Greeks have 3 terms, and it's helpful because by this time the New Testament is being written in Greek. It's helpful to understand these Greek terms. So there's eros, which is the love of being one with something, right? And it can be just, drinking water, so I become one with it. But of course, it could become what has become more commonly known as becoming one with someone through sexual union, erotic love. Then there's philia, that's at the core of philosophia. This is the love that is born out of cooperation. So eros is consumptive, making one with. Philia is cooperation. We work together. And a lot of how we succeed as human beings is the way we work together. But Jesus starts to emphasize a new kind of love, agape. And this is not the love of consumption or cooperation. This is the love of creation. It's the love that God is demonstrating towards humanity in the way God is an ongoing creation of the open future. So God is creating the future. He's creating the historical process and course of that history that makes people possible. See, agape is the kind of love that creates persons. So the main metaphor for agape, if you remember, is the way a parent loves a child. This is the powerful, creative, it's a godlike ability that we have. By participating through love in another being, we can transform that being from a non-person into a person. A person that could enter into a community of persons and find meaning, fellowship, belonging. So that radical transformative power of agape, its ability to radically transform us and reorient us, brings about a metanoia, a radical turning, how you are fundamentally, perspectively knowing the world. So metanoia, I'm fundamentally turning, altering my whole field of consciousness, altering my whole orientation. And what's fundamentally happening in the metanoia, right, of agape is I'm having a personal kairos. My personal course is being radically transformed. So Jesus is not only teaching this, he is exemplifying it. He experiences himself as a kairos, and he's giving to people through agape the possibility of experiencing their own personal kairos. See, what happens in the experience that Jesus is pointing to, I believe, is we get a fundamental reorientation. For a very long time, we are born out of, we are the receivers of agape. It is only because you as an animal, because that's what you are before you're a person, it's only because you as an animal received the agapic love of others that you were actually transformed into a person. And what you actually do, right, is you internalize other people and how they are aware of you. And that is how you gain your reflective rationality. You fundamentally gain your self-understanding, your sense of self, and your ability to reflect on yourself by how you are reflected through other people. It's a fundamental thing to say. and because it is so fundamental and we can say it with few words, it can be trivialized. But we are, in a very deep sense, born out of an agapic love that precedes us. It's because of agape, because of the way other people have devoted themselves and participated in you, that you went from a non-person into a person, that you got the ability. It's almost like other people are mirrors through which you come to see and realize yourself, that you got a sense of self, that you got the ability to reflect on yourself, that you got a sense of your own ownership. There's nothing that, in fact, is more transformative for an adult than having a child. So, from the child's perspective, what's happening is they are, in a sense, consuming the love that the adult is giving them. They're taking in this love and they are becoming one with it. You understand yourself and can reflect on yourself because of the way you have internalized other people's attention on you. But that's the child's perspective. So you can see for the child, it's very egocentric. But take a look at this from the parent's perspective. From the parent's perspective, the person giving agape, it is not egocentric at all. In fact, there is nothing that will more challenge your egocentric orientation, that everything is moving this way, than having a child. If you're a good parent, what happens is you are no longer the center of your salience landscape. The child is, because the child is absolutely dependent upon you. Do you see? This is the metanoia of agape. I go from being egocentric to being centered on someone else. And what I'm actually centered on is I'm centered on the process, right, of creating a person, like God. But not egocentrically, like I'm a God. It's like I am participating in that agapic process that made me. The agape that precedes me flows through me and transforms me as I'm oriented. And what Jesus was offering, I believe, was he was offering a teaching so that all people could experience this, not just individually, personally, with their own parents, but in terms of a relationship to God. We could all experience this fundamental turning such that we become vessels through which agape creates other human beings. So what's going to happen, of course, and you see this in the epistles of John, is the Christian community starts to understand this capacity for radically transforming people so that they become conduits of this godlike creative process whereby non-persons are turned into persons. They're coming to understand agape itself is God. That's what God is. So the Israelite notion of God creating the open history becomes specified in the teachings of Jesus to the idea that, no, God is agape. God is this process that we participate in. And look, it made you. You didn't make it. You participate in agape. It precedes you, it flows through you, and you participate in it insofar as you help other people to come to personhood through you. Now, this is a radical idea. As I mentioned last time, this is going to give the Christians a psychotechnology, a grammar for how to transform perspectival and participatory knowing that is going to allow them to conquer the Roman Empire. I don't mean militarily, of course. What I mean is, what Christians can do is they can offer all the non-persons of the empire a process by which they become persons within a community of persons, enmeshed together in agapic love. So all the women, all the widows, all the sick, all the poor, all the non-male Roman citizens, all the weak can come to Christianity and receive the opportunity and the community that supports this opportunity of a radical transformation. We know that the community there's many different communities around Jesus, I should say. There's, just like around Socrates, there's many different Jesus movements. But this seems to be the key idea. And it seems that it carries with it some kind of notion of a sacrificial element to it. And again, there's a lot of controversy around this, but agape has a sacrificial element to it in that you give yourself, you forgive, you give before the person earns. It's not philia. It is not reciprocity. It is not you and I are working together. You have earned my trust and love. Philia is great and it's important, right? And it's not eros. I love you because of how I can consume you and, right, make you one with me. No, agape has a sacrificial component to it because what I'm actually doing, right, is I'm giving up. I'm making myself an affordance for your transformation from non-person into person. So this is why Jesus emphasizes forgiveness as central to his message. And one of the things we should remember, and this is controversial to say, is Jesus does not anywhere in the Gospels present himself, right, as the means by which, right, we obtain forgiveness from God. He often presents himself as a way and things like that, and we'll talk about that. But when asked how to obtain forgiveness from God, this opportunity of radically transforming ourselves, Jesus' consistent message is by forgiving other people. We experience agape from God, the degree to which we give it to others. And this has been, of course, radically trivialized in our culture, right? We think of forgiveness largely as a matter of, somebody feels sorry and we tell them it's okay. That's not the core idea of forgiveness. The core idea of forgiveness doesn't depend on your contrition. The degree to which you are trying to afford someone else growing into their personhood and the degree to which you are making a sacrifice towards that is already forgiveness. Some forgiveness is when somebody has slighted us and the relationship has been damaged and we have to act agapically in order to reestablish the relationship. But in a very real sense, all agapic love is forgiving love because it is giving before the person that is receiving the love can in any way be said to have earned it. So this idea that we are sacrificially extending the capacity for individuals to redirect their own history, experience their own kairos, was often captured by Jesus in famous language of being born again. You're dying and you're being born again. This radical transformation of your entire orientation, your entire way of being. It's again this process of participatory knowing, reciprocal revelation, right? It's, this mutually accelerating disclosure, this knowing by loving. It's this sensibility transcendence. So notice what's happening here. There's a way you can see that I can go through a process like this and enter into a worldview. And of course, that's what Christianity was offering, right? It was offering people that metanoia of how they can go through this radical transformation in this way, opening up the world, opening up themselves, etc. I'm not a Christian. I'm not advocating for Christianity. I'm trying to get you to understand how profound an expression of meaning, transcendence, and way to wisdom is being on offer here.